You're listening to Intentionally Catholic, a podcast about living our Catholic faith with joy and intention.
Hey everybody, this is Dan Hansen, and you're listening to the Intentionally Catholic podcast, the show that explores how real people like you and me can live our Catholic faith more deeply and more intentionally. Now today, we're going to continue with our focus on Lent, but we're going to look at it from a slightly different perspective, this time from the point of view of a priest who's responsible to God for his flock. Now in John 21, after the resurrection, Jesus asks Peter 3 different times if he loves him. And each time, when Peter affirms his love for the Lord, Jesus tells him to feed my sheep, the Lord's sheep. The flock that each priest watches over is, at the end of the day, Jesus' flock. And that brings about a tremendous weight of responsibility that I can only imagine. Now, as always, I'm joined by Father Ron Hutchinson, rector of the Basilica at St. Adalbert, and Father as our shepherd, leading us to the Lord. Here's a chance for you to talk one-on-one with each listener. You know, that's the beauty of a podcast. While there could be thousands of listeners at any given moment, in each person's experience, really, you're talking directly to him or her. It's personal and it's much more intimate than delivering a homily. So with that in mind, let's talk about the 3 areas of growth you hope we experience over the rest of this Lent. What's the first item on your Lenten spiritual wish list?
Well, I would say that I am hoping or praying for growth in holiness for each of the parishioners. And when I say that, I'm talking about growth in virtue. So how are you each and every day striving more and more for living virtue, living in a way that reflects Christian values, Christ-like behavior, all the things that people would say of the early Christians. Wow, what's different about them? Why are they different? And so I would like that people in my faith community, that others around them are saying, there's something different about them. And why is that? Okay.
So how in the world do we get to that point? I mean, it's little steps, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think it is about deciding to pick a certain virtue and work on it, or when I say virtue, it may be getting rid of a certain bad habit that we just have to really work at. It's funny to me that we all have certain bad habits. We have, let's use these: gossip or bad language or judgmentalism, or, any number of things that we need to work at eradicating so that our hearts are filled more with Christ. And so that's growing in virtue. That's what it means to grow in virtue.
And it's so hard because we all work in the real world and live in the real world, and we encounter stresses from the real world. And I think the lines get blurred. I'm in a position where you're kind of overseeing people to some extent. Lots of us have that. And it's a fine line between dealing with an issue and, is this gossip? Have I crossed this line? And trying to walk a line between being Christ-like and still getting the job done. It's a lot of thinking. It's not just straight up easy all the time. And the world doesn't like it. It's so hard to be in that setting with a group of people where everybody is talking about this person or that person, and to be the one person who either remains quiet or steers the conversation away, it's an awkward setting to be in. It's not an easy
It is awkward, but on the other hand, wouldn't we rather know that we aren't spending our time talking about, or as the term is, gossiping about a person? There's a difference between saying something constructive and just yakking about somebody. Oh, doesn't she just drive you crazy? Blah, 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 blah. Oh yeah. And did you know, come on, it's just a bad habit, because the interesting part of it is we wouldn't want it done about us. But we know if we're doing it with others about others, we know there are others doing it about us.
It's got to stop somewhere, right? The cycle has to stop somewhere.
Yeah. So yes, it's hard, but you know what? Doing the right thing is often hard. Yeah, it is.
Well, and I think that's part of the whole process of Lent. We talked last week about 10 different practices we could adopt. picking one or two or three of those things, implementing them. And a lot of those things are going to help us work on some of these things.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. And so I just think that there's nothing wrong with saying to a group of employees or fellow employees, like, hey, let's work on this. Like, this is just a bad habit we have. You engage everybody in it. It doesn't have to be something like you're doing, oh, I'm holier than you
Absolutely.
are. Why don't you all stop talking about that person because you're such awful people? No, like, let's engage in it together.
Yep.
Let's say, even if for no other reason, I'm not talking about pushing Christian values here, but let's just push good behavior.
Well, you talked a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about evangelization, and sometimes the idea is I'm going to just preach this message. I'm going to bring my Bible and preach the word, and there's value and a place for that, and that's great, and we need to live that. But a lot of the times it has to start with us just living the faith for real in a very practical sense. And sometimes even without the words of, like you just said, I don't have to announce that this is a religious thing that we're doing. It's just a good human thing. And people will see that and be drawn to it. People were drawn to Jesus for those reasons.
Exactly. So I don't think it's that hard to work at growing in holiness. I think we make it harder than it has to be.
All right. So the first hope that you've got is that we'll grow in holiness, develop certain virtues more deeply over the course of this Lent.
Exactly. Number 2, growth in relationship with God. Okay.
All right.
So obviously I'm talking about prayer, growth in prayer. I think that one of the challenges of Christianity today is that people aren't spending time growing in their relationship with God. And if we don't grow in our relationship with God, we aren't going to grow in holiness. We're not going to, grow in a desire to share what we know, all this kind of thing. We're not going to evangelize, So it all starts with relationship. Okay. There is a program that I went through a few years ago that was certification to be a spiritual director. And we talked about it as 3 things: relationship, which helps us to understand our identity and drives our mission as disciples. And so it all starts with relationship. I'm not going to know who I am if I don't know, who I belong to. In a sense, who I'm in relationship with.
Absolutely.
Okay. So then that drives my identity, which then, once I know my identity, which is child of God, beloved son and daughter of God, all of the sense of what it means to be God's child, that then gives me a mission. That gives me a sense of, what am I to do with this? How am I to live? So relationship starts with relationship.
So how do we start to develop that? You say prayer. I mean, what does that look like practically?
I'm looking at a few minutes more a day than you did before. Okay. So start small. 5 minutes a day. Okay. And I'm not saying like, okay, so you did 5 one day, you do 10 the next. No, I'm talking 5 for months and months and months till it's such a regular habit that you go, oh, I want to do 10. I want to expand this, but start with 5 small minutes, and that it involves maybe 3 things, that 5 minutes. First, praise and thanks to God for who he is in your life and why you're so grateful for him. Secondly, intercession, what I need this day, what I need help with this day. And finally, just an opportunity to say, thank you for this day and be with me. There. Simple 5 minutes.
Pretty informal, pretty basic. Work with that 5 minutes is what you're saying for months if it takes it.
Mm-hmm. Till it is such a habit that it doesn't ever get missed. And so it's going to mean finding where's that 5 minutes going to come from. Many times I have found that people discover 5 minutes out of a lunch hour isn't that big of a deal. Go someplace quiet, sit someplace quiet, 5 minutes. isn't as hard as you think it is, because any of our lunch hours or lunch half hours, we waste 5 minutes probably. We go immediately onto the phone and start scrolling and looking and blah, blah, blah. 5 minutes. Start small. Don't think big.
I'm sure I can find the 5 minutes. I think my biggest struggle is going to be quieting my mind during those 5 minutes.
That's why I notice I'm making it a very active 5 minutes.
Got a lot of things you want me to accomplish in this 5 minutes.
Yeah,
that's helping me out.
I'm not asking you to contemplate for 5 minutes or meditate for 5 minutes. I'm asking you to be busy for those 5 minutes with God.
No, I get that. I do know that my mind is running in a million different directions, trying to think about this. Did I accomplish that? And even when I'm in the best of intentions, I'm in a conversation with God, all of a sudden I wake up from that and realize I've just spent the last 3 minutes thinking about this work issue or this. What am I making for dinner again? I don't even know where the thoughts come from. I guess I probably do know where the thoughts come from. I don't think the devil enjoys us having these 5 minutes, but will take work. And I don't think we need to nail it every single time.
No,
but
we've got to make an effort at it. Yeah.
All right. So build that relationship.
Yeah. We've got growth in holiness. We've got growth in relationship with God. And finally, growth in mission. Okay. I'm looking at how am I going to be a better disciple each and every day? How am I going to be a better disciple each and every day? How am I going to live this mission better each and every day? So, yeah, I want people to grow in holiness. I want them to grow in their relationship with God, but I want them to grow in mission, which means I want people to start thinking about, what is my discipleship really looking like? Okay. Am I really doing anything that helps promote the kingdom, that helps, encourage society to be better, helps me to live this in a very concrete way. I think that so often we just live our lives, but I'm asking, what are you doing that really is like living the gospel, so to speak?
Do you have some examples of some things you'd like to see us tackling? What does that literally look like?
I would like people to say, is there one thing I should be involved in the parish that I've not been involved in the past, some ministry that I'm feeling called to, that I'm feeling like drawn to, okay? And particularly, I would think it should be a ministry that maybe kind of helps us to grow in some way, okay? But so it could be like being somebody who goes out to the homebound and sick and takes communion to them, or and that person doesn't even have to be a Eucharistic minister at Mass. They can just be, they have one person they go out and they take Eucharist to once a week. So they are working on a corporal work of mercy, so to speak. Okay. Which is taking care of the sick in the homebound.
So with that, is that something you can help us make that connection?
Oh, yeah. All they have to do is call the parish office and say, hey, you know what? I would like to visit a homebound person and take communion to them. How do I do this? And guess what? We'll get you so set up you won't even know what happened to you.
All right.
So it'll happen in seconds.
All right. All right. So plenty of need out there in that regard.
There's need. Or maybe it's going to be, you know what? I've always wanted to help once a month at a soup kitchen. I want to go to God's kitchen and serve food and feel like I'm doing something positive for the homeless in Grand Rapids. Okay. That way I don't have to, feel guilty when I'm, ignoring the panhandler, when I say I don't have any change, blah, blah, blah. I'm doing something concrete. Okay. That is going to help these individuals. Or maybe it's going to be that you say, you know what? I've always wanted to take communion to people at the hospital. And guess what? All the hospitals have services that allow people to be Eucharistic ministers that bring communion to those who are in the hospital. When I was in the hospital 2 years ago, I had every single day someone came and brought me communion, or about every other day. There were days I said no. I just wasn't feeling up to it that day, or or they were taking blood at that moment and it just wasn't the right time, whatever,
Sure.
But there are lots of ways to give of ourselves, is what I'm saying.
And I think a lot of us, I don't know about a lot of us. I know me. I don't know what those are. I don't know how to find them.
Talk to your priest. He'll come up with something. Or maybe it's going to be, I know the parish has lots of needs for their ministries. Maybe I say to you, you know what? Help me with Cor Jesu once a month. Come and usher people to the sacrament of reconciliation. But that just helps me. And that is doing something good for others. Okay.
What if I'm not, this is going to sound like a silly question, but it's not meant to be. What if I'm not holy enough for these kinds of things? And I do think that isn't a concern, that I don't feel like, man, I'm just not that
I think
person.
I think what we have to do is figure out what is something I could be doing that doesn't require great holiness. Okay. What about maybe I just ask the parish for a list of the homebound people and their addresses and send a card once a month to each of them, to a set of 5. You get 5 names. That's pretty. It doesn't even have to be signed by you. It could be from the Basilica faith community of the Basilica of St. Adalbert, thinking of you.
Did you just make that up on the fly?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. So really,
it can be as easy as that.
Exactly.
It doesn't have to be something that even anybody else knows you're doing, So I just think that anything that, maybe it's that you pray for, ask for the names of the first communion kids, first names, and you pray for one of them each week till they receive first communion. There's lots of little things, we don't have to, they're not big. They don't have to be massive.
No, but I think they still have a huge impact, and they have a huge impact on the people that we're serving, but also a huge impact on us. I mean, it breaks us out of our shell a little bit if we're in one. Not everybody is, but I got a feeling, everything I read, everything I've ever seen, it's not like you don't have a surplus of people rushing you to serve, and you're struggling to find places to put people. In most parishes,
exactly.
It's a struggle.
That's not happening. Yeah. I mean, most of the time I'm struggling to find people, not struggling to find things for people to do. That's not my problem.
No.
So, I mean, I just think that there's lots of opportunities. I could go on and on. It's just, and some of them aren't going to be like, they're not going to be like out there, like being Peter or Paul, let me tell you about Jesus. Maybe some of them are just going to be doing functional things for the parish, but you're helping the parish community,
Well, everything we do helps. It helps us, and it helps the people that we're
helping
serving.
Other people to be able to come to mass and have a clean church, or have a, organized place, or, whatever it may be. It's just, often people may think these things are silly, but, they're called what we have to do to have a community that's always there and available.
Right. Well, one of my spiritual gifts is cleaning, Father.
Oh, good.
So
good. We could put you to work.
I'm actually pretty good. I could help with that. All right. Anything else that you want to add before we wrap this one up?
I think the whole point of all this, and if you notice, I'm using the word growth. We've got to be moving forward. And so I just think that Lent is about growth. It's about becoming more than we were before Lent, and more than we were last year.
And those can be little steps.
I'm not saying you have to make this is, Mother, may I take a very tiny step? Yes, you may.
All right. Well, that's going to be it for the week. Thanks for listening. And as always, let us know your thoughts. You can put those right in the comments. That'll go straight to us. I'll get them to Father Ron if you've got questions for him. For Intentionally Catholic, I'm Dan Hansen.
I'm Father Ron Hutchinson. God bless.
Thanks for listening to Intentionally Catholic. If you like what you heard, please consider sharing our show with a friend. If you have comments, questions, or topics you'd like to hear discussed, please email those to comments@icatholic.show, and be sure to tune in next time for another episode.